Hello, Overcomers, and welcome back to Connect Ovar Coffee. So today we are cooking for chemo. So, as we go through chemotherapy, it's not just physically draining for our bodies, and we also have so much else to do as we go through chemos, like cooking for our children or family members. Oftentimes we don't have the energy or the stamina to just go through the day, forget about cooking. However, many of you, including me, we love to cook, and we are forever looking for the simple recipes that we can bring very quickly to the table for the families to eat, even for ourselves when we are not feeling up to it, but still want something fresh and refreshing to have. And so who other than Chef Ryan Callahan to join us and tell us more about cooking for chemo today. And just to give you a brief introduction, Ryan is an award-winning author and chef, and he's the author of Chef Ryan's How to Cook cookbook, Cooking for Chemo and After, Cooking for Kids with Cancer, as well as Chef Ryan Callahan's Tasting Journal. So please share this video with your friends, family, and network, whoever benefits from this tremendous information that Ryan is going to share with us. Also, he's going to take us live to his kitchen and cook something for us that we can all follow along as we go along, and then make it at our home. So with that, welcome, Ryan, and thank you so very much for doing this for us.
Hello, and thank you for having me. It's always great to cook for not just family, but friends, because I think that friends and family are the same thing. And as I always say, I've never met a stranger, so everyone's my friend.
Love that. So before we get to the cooking, I just had a few questions for you, because I just wanted to know, and I'm pretty sure all our listeners would want to know as well. Tell us what inspired you to become a chef.
Well, so I'm 34 now, and I've been cooking in the restaurant industry and teaching and doing all kinds of other stuff since I was 15. And really the reason I got into cooking was I just always loved food. I mean, I've lost a lot of weight recently, so I can't say, hey, look at me, I'm a big guy anymore. But I used to say that, right? But I've always loved food ever since I was a little kid. We in my family get-togethers are always about the meal, Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter or what so have you. And it was always about the big family meal, the barbecues in the summer. And so for me, food was always it was always love. It was always happiness. It was always a good time. And when I was a little kid, I asked for an easy bake oven when I was 6 years old for Christmas, and I got one. And that's really where I fell in love with cooking. And so you started making these little things, the easy bake oven, and then you're a kid, and you go outside and you go play, but then you can go make yourself a treat, right? Well, where it really solidified that this is what food is what I want to do for my life. I had a job at this almost defunct sandwich chain now called Quiznos. There's a few of them left in the country, but Quiznos was my first cooking job, and I got it when I was 15 years old, and they used to let me cut the sandwiches. And then one day they're like, you know what, Ryan, we're going to let you make a sandwich. And I'll never forget this. This guy comes in, and I remember thinking, this guy's a jerk. He's like, let me get this sandwich on this bread and blah, blah, blah. He was just mean and rude. He just was like, the whole time. And then we made the sandwich, and he sat down. I was watching this guy. It was the first sandwich I'd ever made for someone. I wanted to see if he liked it. Did I make it right? Was it too much sauce, not enough meat? Did I get it right? I just wanted to watch him. So I sat there and watched him. He's angry. He's upset. And he sits down and takes a bite out of his sandwich. He goes, and he gets happy, and it's a smile on his face, and all of a sudden he's super excited and happy. And that was the moment for me where I said, this is what I want to do with my life. And I was 15 years old, and I kept cooking, I kept moving, and that's what made me want to be a chef, is that moment of watching that guy go from having such a horrible day to having such a great day, and food being the catalyst for it. And I said, I want to bring happiness to the world in this fashion.
And that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it with us. And as far as the cooking for chemo, tell us about your inspiration behind writing that book.
Yeah, so Cooking for Chemo is my first book. I won a Gourmand Award in 2016 for Best Health and Nutrition Cookbook out of the United States. Cooking for Chemo came from my experience as a caregiver, working with my mom. She had HER2 positive breast cancer, and at the time, we owned a restaurant, co-owned a restaurant down in Texas, actually not too far away from where you actually are headquartered in College Station. So we're about an hour north of you. And so I co-owned this Chinese restaurant with some family friends, and we found out that there was a lump with my mom. And, the lump turns into a this, a that. Next thing you know, we've been into treatment for a year, and we've had multiple reconstruction surgeries and chemotherapy. And I actually lost both of my grandfathers and my best friend in college to cancer. And so I knew what I was getting into, the mouth sores, metallic taste, loss of appetite, and I'm going to be honest, I'm a big fat mama's boy. When I heard my mom, my mama, ain't nobody messing with my mama, right? And so we shut it down. We moved straight back to Boulder, Colorado, took care of my mom, and I was a living caregiver. And so I knew what I was getting into, so I went around to these different cancer organizations. So I was like, what do you guys do for metallic taste? What do you do for mouth sores? What do you do for this? And I wanted to know, and nobody really had a good answer. And so I sat down with my mom, and I cooked every single meal, and I wrote these all down in what's called a tasting journal. And we logged all this information, and over time it developed into a system that we now call Cooking for Chemo. And what I learned was that she really liked things a little savory, a little extra sweet. If I added some palate cleansers like some red wine vinegar and a little bit of sugar into each dish, into each meal, she could eat more. And I came up with a system of ways to basically combat the side effects, eat more food, be happier, and have a better quality of life. And I took that and put that into a pamphlet, which I was just going to call Cooking for Chemo. And I was going to give it to people and just say, here it is, free, take it. And my wife read it, and she's not a chef. And she looks at me and she goes, Ryan, this is great, but this is way too technical. This is written for chefs, by chefs, thinking like chefs, talking in chef terms. So she really sat down with me and helped me to turn it from just these simple 18 pages into a really well thought out method of cooking and thinking and recipes and more and more and more, and it just built and built and built. And now we're on version 2, which is actually the third version. There's a story there, but we won't go into it. But so we released it in 2015, and that's when we won the 2016 award. And that's really where Cooking for Chemo came from, is just a way to give cancer patients, because if I needed this information, everybody going through cancer treatments and even in remission needs this information, because people need to know about that your flavor preferences change over time. And it's just, it's like this guy I work with says, cancer is not about what is normal. It's about finding your new normal.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way of saying it. And thank you for writing this book, because I'm sure so many people have benefited from the information and the recipes that you have shared in that book. And so as a caregiver, that you have been first-hand witness to so many side effects of chemotherapy, right, including a change in taste, as you talked about, appetite changes, etc. So what would be your primary recommendations to our overcomers in terms of cooking for chemo?
So if you're going through chemo, or even if you're in remission or you're going into it, there's a couple of really important things you need to think about. And the most important things are thinking about what you like. Because if you don't know what you like, and especially even more importantly, what you don't like, you're not going to be successful with your meal choices, right? So let's say you really like Krispy Kreme donuts, and you take a bite out of a Krispy Kreme donut while you're in treatment, and it tastes like a Big Mac. You're going to be like, wait a minute, that's kind of gross, right? You're going to be like, even if you like Big Macs, you're going to be very surprised. I'd be very surprised if any donut tasted like Big Mac, right? So the first thing you want to find out is, what do foods taste to you like now? Because as you go through treatment and as you go into remission, these chemicals that are in your body, basically the prescription drugs, they change in concentration and vary, and it changes without getting too deep into the science of it, it changes the way that you perceive things, right? Not mind altering like a hallucinogenic kind of thing, like no one's on drugs over here. But what we're talking about is, like red wine vinegar doesn't taste like red wine vinegar anymore. Salty things taste more salty. These taste more savory. These taste more sweet. So the first thing I'd say is learn your new preferences. Then to build on that, I would say give yourself permission to not like things, right? Say, if you try something, if you eat a cheeseburger, you're craving a cheeseburger, you've been dying all day for a cheeseburger, and you finally get that cheeseburger and you bite into it, it tastes gross to you, give yourself permission to not like it. That's the other thing you want to do. Because, I grew up in the generation, and I'm sure a lot of people did, of where their moms, their grandmas were like, you're going to clean everything on your plate. No one's letting food go to waste in this household. Well, that's great when things are all, hunky-dory, everything's fine, and you're a growing child. But in this instance, in chemotherapy, and especially after, when you're trying to heal and your body's trying to rebuild itself, It's about eating the things that you like and that you can get into, because any food is better than no food, right? Because you want to be able to eat in general. So that's number 2. So give yourself the permission to say no. Number 3, building on those 2 concepts, is to make your life easy. Make meals that are easy to reheat, easy to store. Prep out your food in advance. If you know that you're going to eat 10 snacks in a week, and you really like pierogies, cook a bunch of pierogies, put them into little 1 or 2 piece portions and freeze them so you can microwave them later, or warm them up in the oven, reboil them, whatever is easy for you, right? And make little snacks and things like that. So make meals that are easy to reheat and to enjoy, and that would be number 3. And then number 4 would be to build on the learning your preferences is work with the person who's your caregiver, or you yourself as the cancer patient, if you're cooking for yourself and you can still do that, to keep a tasting journal. Because if you can log what your preferences are and what you like and what you don't like, you can really begin to identify the patterns. Like, I like salty food, or I like savory food. And this will be, you could take this to your dietitian, right? Your oncological dietitian. Say that phrase 3 times fast: oncological dietitian, oncological dietitian, oncological dietitian, right? You do that, and you take it to them, and you say, hey, let's say the guy's name's, Katie. Hey, Katie, I'm doing well with Brussels sprouts, but I really don't like kale. And I'm doing really well with broccoli, but I don't like cauliflower, right? Or I really like chicken, but I'm really doing bad with pork. Or I like beef, but I really don't like fish, right? And they can help you build recipes and, tell you what you need, post-surgery, post-treatment, and so on and so forth, and really keep a log of that. But really, ultimately, at the end of the day, cooking for chemo, what I teach and what we deal with is we really teach you and work with you to understand what food tastes like, what you like, and how to make more good-tasting food that you like. And that's what it's really all about.
Amazing. And so I do have a question on herbs and spices, because like I mentioned, I like cooking, and so I would love to get your guidance on it. So especially when you're cooking for chemo, tell us the top 5 herbs and spices that you would recommend to use while cooking for chemo, and why.
Sure. So if you're going through chemotherapy, the 5 herbs and spices that I really like, my preferences change on a daily basis, so it's not fair to ask me, like, what do I really like? But there's a couple that people either do really well with or do really poorly with. One of them I actually have here, and it's ground cumin. People either, during treatment, they either love this or they hate it. And the reason for that is the pungency in it. It's super strong. It's spicy. To some people, it smells like feet. Like my wife says, oh, don't cook that in my house. It smells like feet. But me, I'm like, oh, what's that delicious smell, right? Because it's used in Mediterranean food and Middle Eastern food. It's used in curries. It's used in, food for the Maghreb, which is Northern Africa and the Levant. It's used in a bunch of Lebanese immigrants came over into Mexico, and they influenced Northern Mexican cuisine, and it's just everywhere now. It's warm. It's delicious. I love it, right? So people either do really well or really poorly with that. One of the things that I really like that I cook with a lot is crushed red pepper. I like things a little spicy, but not just because of the spiciness aspect. It's the warmth that it adds to a dish. So spicy flavors are amplifiers. They make all the other naturally occurring flavors stronger, right? They make them awesome. And we'll talk more about that when we do our cooking demonstration, but I really like crushed red pepper. If you don't like spicy food, I don't recommend that as well. I really like basil and oregano, and this is just a little bit of that. I like it because basil and oregano adds, well, I'm from St. Louis, and we have a huge Italian population here. I grew up eating Italian food. I cook a lot of Italian food. My wife's family is from Italy. I mean, it's kind of like a mainstay. But not just that, but basil and oregano, they can be soothing. They can be delicious. They can be wonderful. They can be settling on your stomach. Same thing with bay leaves. Bay leaves are really soothing on your stomach. So if you're really going through treatment, I really recommend, especially if you're dealing with nausea, ginger, bay leaves, rosemary, thyme, parsley. Those are really the big 5. If you can find it in a Simon and Garfunkel song, odds are it's going to be really soothing on your stomach.
Love it. That's awesome. And so on that, I would love for you to share one easy recipe with our listeners, and just take us to your kitchen, which we're already in, and show us what
go to my kitchen.
Yeah, and show us what we can do together.
So we have tons and tons and tons of resources, guides, printable PDFs, all kinds of stuff at cookingforchemo.org, which is my website. And all that stuff's free. It's all free information. I really recommend starting with the how-to part of Cooking for Chemo, understanding the flavor and the taste perception changes, and going through. We've got free articles. You can buy a book if you want, but everything's free on there. And we have tons of recipes on there. So what this first recipe, or should I say this only recipe, we only got so much time here. Why are you trying to make me do multiple recipes, right? No. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make summer salad, which is one of my personal favorites. Everyone has their own recipe, and I'm going to share my recipe for it. It's actually on my website. You can just go to cookingforchemo.org. It's underneath the light snacks tab in there. And so we're going to do just a real quick summer salad. I'm going to teach you guys a little bit about how you perceive flavor and why I put the things that I do into this dish and how you can adjust it for your flavor preferences, which is really what it's all about. So first thing we want to talk about is how you perceive food. And just real quick, light overview on this. But basically, you perceive food, when people say, I ate this and it, if you had to use the sense is taste, right? This tasted delicious. It tasted wonderful. But that's only one part of the actual eating experience. And so you actually only taste 5 flavors with that, which is your tongue. It's salty, savory, spicy, sour, and sweet. Of course, a lot of people ask me about bitter. Bitter is actually just the inverse of sour. Sour flavors are acidic. Bitter flavors are actually based on the pH level. So the first thing you taste is, of course, salt. So we always use, not always salt, but a lot of times salt, we use it in our cooking. And the reason we use it is because it amplifies all the other natural flavors inside of the dish. And it actually mostly activates the next flavor, which is savory. This is soy sauce, naturally brewed soy sauce. I love this stuff. I use it in many, many things. But this has a high concentration of glutamic acid, which is an amino acid that's super savory. You find it in mushrooms, tomatoes, seaweed, kelp was the word I was looking for, green tea, red wine, basically any steak, proteins, anything that's got a high protein or amino acid content you think of as being savory, it's going to have a lot of glutamic acids in it. They're just these amino acids that are just really, really tasty and delicious, and they make everything great. But salt activates these amino acids that makes everything savory. So the next flavor, like I talked about, is spicy. In this recipe, we'll be using ground black pepper to be our spicy thing. And like I talked about earlier, it amplifies all the other naturally occurring flavors. So we have the first amplifier, the second amplifier. Savory flavors, of course, also give us our flavor of this deliciousness, this umami, this ume, as they say in Japanese, which means delicious. Then we have our lightener, which is red wine vinegar. This is our first sour flavor. This is the thing we're going to use to lighten all the other flavors in the dish and remove metallic tastes on your palate. And then, of course, we have what is most kids' and myself's favorite flavor, which is, of course, sugar, right? Because it's sweet. So we use sugar in conjunction with the vinegar, and that helps to diminish the overly sour and acidic flavors and allows the sour to lighten the dish while not being overwhelming. And that's the real light version of that. So this recipe is real easy. So first thing we're going to need is about a cup of grape tomatoes. I got those pre-sliced already, and I already washed my hands, so no one needs to get mad at me for touching the food. Plus, I'm eating it anyways. Who are you to judge me? So we got just some grape tomatoes. You cut them in half, and what we're going to do is, so we'll take the grape tomatoes, and we'll take just a little bit of kosher salt. I like to use kosher salt because it's got these big grains, and you can really see them on my hand. And these big grains are easier to see. And when you see all that salt, you go, oh, that's a lot of salt. And so it naturally keeps you from over-salting your food. It's a really nice little thing. So that's about half a teaspoon at the most of salt. So we're just going to put that in there, get those nice and covered, and we're going to toss those lightly like this. And the reason we're going to do that is tomatoes, just like I talked about earlier, are not only fragrant, like, I wish you could smell this, right? You could smell the fragrance of the tomatoes. The tomatoes, though, are a very savory food. They're a really savory fruit, and they've got a little bit of sugar in them, which also makes them sweet. So what we're going to do is add the salt to this, and that salt is going to activate the savory aspect of the tomatoes and amplify them and make them extra savory. So the next thing we're going to add is one of my favorite summer vegetables, which is cucumbers. We'll just toss that all together. And then we're going to add something that adds another bit of aromatic quality, which is green peppers. And they're not spicy, but they've got that touch of warmth to them. Okay, and then we're just going to give this a quick toss so that that salt can work its way through all of that.
That's green bell pepper, right, Ryan?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Green bell peppers, not poblanos, not hot chilies, nothing too terribly hot or spicy here. They're sweet, and they've got that warmth to them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit of black pepper, because the black pepper is going to bring out the other naturally occurring flavors in this. And of course, if I was making this I'm making this for myself, but if I was making this for somebody as their caregiver, I would want to know, do they like salty? Do they like spicy? What's working for them, right? So if they're liking their food a little extra savory, I would make sure to add extra tomatoes to this dish. If I found that they really didn't like tomatoes at all, I would omit the tomatoes and I'd just use the green bell peppers. Maybe I'd substitute some green beans instead, because those are savory as well. So give that a nice coat. Okay, so the next thing we do here is typically what you do is you just kind of mix this all together, taste it, go, that's good. Let's leave it for 30 minutes. But we're on a time crunch. We don't have 30 minutes. So the next thing you're going to need is my favorite olives, which are Kalamata olives. They're a Greek olive. The ones I got, they're the purple ones, and they're just pre-sliced. This is what they have at the store. Personally, I prefer the whole ones because they catch a little bit of the feta cheese, which is what I always add to this, and they make these little pocket explosions of deliciousness. So we'll add that into there, and then we'll add my last ingredient, which is, of course, feta cheese. So feta cheese is savory, and it's got a little bit of a pungency to it, right? So let's say you don't like feta cheese. You could also substitute shaved Parmesan, like the big sliced chunks, so you get the variety to it for the texture. You could add grated Parmesan to this. You could also add mozzarella pearls, and you could pretty much any crumbly cheese, like Mexican cheese. I could recommend would be like a queso blanco. That would work too, or a queso fresca. Just these quick little cheeses. And so what you do is you just lightly mix this up, and you get this really, really beautiful, so you guys can see there, this beautiful color configuration. Now, this is all good and fine and dandy, and you could probably eat this as it is. But what really makes this recipe, in my opinion, go over the top is a little bit of red wine vinaigrette dressing. I happen to like the Wishbone red wine vinaigrette dressing for this. It's got a touch of sweetness to it to offset the flavor of the vinegar. And you're just going to want to put about 2 tablespoons in there, maybe 3. And just give that a quick toss. And keep it going. And what you want really is for the vinaigrette to touch every part of it. Now let's say you don't like red wine vinaigrette. You could use lemon juice. You could use olive oil with lemon juice. You could use balsamic vinegar. You could use cider vinegar. You could use rice wine vinegar. Really what we want is the vinegar to come in here, and what it's going to do is it's going to lighten those metallic tastes. It's going to help reduce the weight of the dish, and when we say weight, we don't mean like, oh, it's so heavy, oh, it only weighs 4 pounds now that I added vinegar, oh, hey, maybe we should add vinegar to my belly and I'll lose weight, right? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I mean is the heaviness of the dish. When you eat something like a cheeseburger, it leaves a residue in your mouth, but the pickle's got the vinegar in it, right? And it cleanses after each bite. So that's the same thing that vinegar does in this recipe, is it really lightens it. And so what we're really doing when we're cooking is we're trying to do a balancing act between salty, savory, spicy, sour, sweet. And then we're trying to build our appetite from a distance with these beautiful, wonderful aromatic flavors that come off here. Like when you make chicken and dumplings and it, wafts up the stairs, where you grill a portobello mushroom, or you saute mushrooms and garlic, all of a sudden there's this beautiful smell that comes off the food, because all food has a smell. And actually what we always talk about is that smell is actually your superpower. People don't realize how powerful your sense of smell is. And your sense of smell tells you, should I be hungry? Is this delicious? Is this nasty? Like I could just eat, and if I drive by a barbecue restaurant down the street, I'm hungry again, because that smell comes into your car. You're like, pork time, right? You get excited, or if you're in Texas, you're like, brisket, right? So that's what it's all about, right? It's about building this beautiful smell from a distance, so that when the cancer fighter, if you're cooking for them, is smelling it, they're getting hungry as you're cooking it, right? And we want to build those flavors from a distance using, aromatic herbs and spices and all kinds of delicious stuff, slow simmering, whatever you got to do, right? But eating's not just taste and smell. you also see the food, right? So we're doing a video conference, not an audio conference, right? So we're looking at the food and saying, oh, yeah, that looks good, right? Because we're seeing it. You guys can't smell it. You can't taste it. You know, I can taste it, but that might be mean, right? But I can smell it and I can taste it. But you guys see it, you go, you know in your mind, based on those color configurations, your brain sees the colors and says, ooh, that's exciting. I bet that tastes good. I could have done the worst job seasoning this ever, but you still want to eat this, right? Because it looks good. So we want to build that sense of smell, reward it with a sense of taste, build that appetite with our sight, and when we hear cooking, we want to use our sense of sound as a way to associate something like, for example, music, right? If you go into a Mexican restaurant and they're playing mariachi music, right? You'll be like, okay, I'm in a Mexican restaurant. If you go to an Italian restaurant, they're going to play Italian music. Go to a Greek restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, so on and so forth. But if you go to a Chinese restaurant and they're playing mariachi music, you're going to be like, wait, am I at the right place? Like, are you sure this is Chang's house of noodles, or is this Enrique's? You know, like, where am I, right? That sense of sound can set your expectation for what's coming and what's happening. And we use this with my mom. The idea is called classical conditioning. I love crooner music and big band music, and so I always played, you know, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., all those guys whenever we were, whenever I was cooking, right? So she'd hear, fly me to the moon, right? And then she'd smell the sizzling garlic wafting up the stairs, and then she'd hear me cooking. So she'd know something good was coming. And then she'd smell it, right? And then when it started getting real good, she kind of, you know, she was up in her room. She was having cancer treatment. She lived in her room, right? And then she'd just come downstairs, peek her little nose around like a little mouse looking for a crumb, you know, and she'd come down and be like, oh, Ryan, what is that? That smells good, right? And then she'd see the presentation. And so I'd have this beautiful dish here for her. So she knows from the smell that it's time to eat. She hears that it's time to eat. She sees that it's time to eat. It's beautiful. So now she's really excited. So the last two things we have to overcome are touch, which takes the form of mouth sores, right? So we want to make sure that our food's not too hot, it's not too spicy, it's not too abrasive, so no cornmeal, nothing that's going to really offend your senses, right? Especially when you have mouth sores. So let's say mouth sores aren't an issue. This is ready to go, right? Then all we got to do is make sure the salty, savory, spicy, sour, and sweet are in line to her preferences. Bing, bang, boom. My mom's going back for 2 or 3 bowls of this stuff. She's not going to sit there and kind of pick at it for a while. She's going to go at it. And that is, in a nutshell, in a very simple, easy to understand recipe way, that is cooking for chemo in a nutshell. So it is really too bad that this is not being filmed on location, because you could share this with me.
So we have to bring you here in Houston for an in-person presentation sometime. And as you were doing this, I was thinking that if we could, and tell me if this would be even possible, because to me, if I could have like few slices of like juicy mangoes in there,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
as a summer add to that salad, wouldn't that be nice, or would that conflict with the other taste?
No, you can really, you know, I love mangoes. I was exposed to mangoes when I was 25 years old. I never even heard of a mango or seen it. I live in the Midwest. We have what we have. You know, you have steak, you have chicken, you have beef, you have pork, you have apples, you have oranges, you get bananas. Those are your choices, right, up until about 10 years ago. And then there started being a lot of choices. And then I got exposed to mangoes. And it was this guy from Mexico that I cooked with. And he's like, you've never had a mango? I was like, no, I've never had a mango. He goes, oh, mangoes are the most delicious fruit. You know, like, and so we had it, and I fell in love with them. Yeah. They're unbelievable. And actually, did you know that they're actually the world's most popular fruit? I had no idea. But yeah, you could absolutely add, so the red wine vinaigrette I use is a little sweet. So you could actually just use olive oil and red wine vinegar and add cut mangoes into it. Or you could add blueberries, or you could add strawberries. You could add apple slices for that sweetness. You know, you could add anything you wanted. I don't know if I would do banana slices with olives, but I bet mangoes would go really well.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't do bananas in there. And I was also thinking that you could probably do, if you're thinking about, you know, adding some protein to that, mm-hmm. you could put some shrimp inside mm-hmm. that salad too, and just have like not too like sauteed, not too much, but just subtle shrimp.
Yeah.
Just a few pieces.
Like some nice like nice cold prawns that have been like boiled.
Correct. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Just real simple.
Yeah, that'd be great.
See, this is what cooking's all about. This is it. See, it's about taking what I give you and then adding your twist to your preferences and you know, where you came from, right? So I come from the Midwest. I have, you know, what is comfort food to me is different from comfort food for someone who grew up in Eastern China or someone who grew up in Australia, you know, and so comfort food's subjective. And that's really one of the best ways to get people to eat is, you know, like when you're sick, what do you want?
Correct. Yep.
No, I'm asking you, what do you want?
I mean, I don't want anything when I'm sick, honestly. I mean, I don't like to eat when I'm sick, but I would probably eat that. That salad looks so refreshing. No, seriously, it looks so refreshing and it's fresh and it's beautiful. Those colors look amazing. So I would, and then I would add my mangoes and that would be it. You know, that's how I would eat that.
If you like Greek yogurt, you could add Greek yogurt to this.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And it'd be like a tzatziki sauce. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, food is universal. You know, it's really about putting your spin on it. Like you said, the mangoes or maybe even some shrimp if you need the extra protein. Or you could even double up on the feta cheese. I really am personally passionate about Kalamata olives and feta cheese. I think they are one of the greatest flavor combinations because you have the almost the overwhelming pungency of the feta with the creaminess. You got the creaminess of the olive with the tanginess of it, and it just works for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ryan. This was fantastic, and it was so easy, and it's anyone can follow the instructions, and like you said, they can go to your website, right, to get more recipes and get more information about other things that they might also look at and try to cook. So thank you very much. My last question before we go is, would you have any parting message for our overcomers?
Yes, absolutely. So here's what I would say is you can do this. If you're fighting cancer, if you're in remission, if you're going into fighting cancer, if you're a caregiver, you can do this. It's not easy. It is hard. It's a lot of work. But if you put in the work, if you eat the food, if you listen to your doctor, if you show up for your treatments, if you follow your regimen, if you make sure that you avoid cachexia and starvation, you're eating what you need, you can do it. And eating is so important. It's not just the nutritional aspect. There's the social aspect. There's the family aspect. There's the comfort aspect. There's so much to eating. I mean, cultures can be based around food. You know, like each culture has not only its own language, but its own cuisine, and they're only describing those foods inside of that culture. And so it's so important to the human experience to have that, to eat the food, to feel loved, to feel comforted, you know, and you need that, especially when you're going through cancer because, you know, like we're going to kick, you know, cancer square in the butt, right? Yeah, we're going to do it, but you can't do it and run the marathon if you're not eating. And that's really what it is. It's simple, easy adjustments, salty, savory, spicy, sour, sweet, making the flavors in a way that you like them, and then just committing to do it with a tasting journal and just following up, writing down every meal you eat. Did I like this? Did I not like this? Et cetera, et cetera. And that is really what I would say.
Thank you, Ryan. I also, going back to your salad, I just feel like this is not just fresh and refreshing, but it's also easy. And the ingredients are simple. You can get them anywhere, and you can just toss it and prepare it within 5 to 7 minutes. And when you're not feeling well, this is something that you can just do in like that and be ready to go. So that was fantastic. Not just for women who are going through chemotherapy, but for everyone really that's pressed for time. This is a fantastic recipe. So thank you so very much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. And we, as we talked about, we'll get you here for a presentation in person sometime. We would love to host you sometime. But meanwhile, thank you so very much for sharing this. And Overcomers, we will be back very soon with our next episode of Connect Ovar Coffee. Until then, bye.